The officer's hand hovered over the grip of his weapon, his voice sharp and saturated with suspicion as he barked at the man standing calmly beside the sleek private jet. His words sliced through the heavy summer air, echoing across the tarmac where the faint scent of jet fuel lingered. The man, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, did not flinch. His gaze was steady, unblinking, his breathing measured. Around them, the bustle of the airport seemed to slow, as though the world itself were holding its breath. Passengers in the distance paused, eyes darting between the rigid red-faced officer and the quiet figure who stood motionless, as if carved from stone. The tension was electric, the kind that made strangers turn away in nervous self-preservation. The cop's voice rose again, accusing, interrogating, as his palm tightened over the cold metal of his holster. The man said nothing. Not because he couldn't defend himself, but because he understood the futility of arguing with someone whose mind was already made up. His silence was not surrender. It was a mirror, reflecting the ugliness of the moment back at the aggressor. Minutes earlier, he had been walking toward the jet, his stride even and unhurried. He carried no luggage, only a slim leather case in his right hand. The sun caught the faint streaks of silver at his temples. At a glance, he could have been any executive boarding his flight, but the officer's gaze had fixed on his skin before it had taken in anything else. The murmurs of nearby ground crew were almost imperceptible, yet the weight of their silence pressed down like humidity before a storm. The man's calm demeanor only seemed to irritate the officer further, who now demanded to know why he was there, who gave him clearance, and how someone like him could possibly afford, let alone own, the man's story was not written in the lines of his suit or the gleam of the aircraft. It was etched into his bones, his memory, and the quiet scars that would never fade. Years earlier, he had worn a different uniform. Sand and dust had been his constant companions then, the air thick with the scent of oil and cordite. He had known what it was to hear the whistle of incoming fire, to taste the metallic tang of adrenaline in his mouth, to see friends fall and never rise again. He had once carried not a leather case, but the weight of an entire squadron's survival on his shoulders. In the dead of night, beneath a foreign sky, he had led men through enemy terrain, navigating not only hostile forces, but the gnawing fear that any wrong step would be their last. There had been no applause when the mission ended, no cameras waiting when they returned, only the quiet nods of men who understood that survival was victory enough. After the service, the battles didn't stop, they merely changed form. Civilian life had brought different kinds of enemies, paperwork, prejudice, and a gnawing emptiness that came from trading a clear mission for the fog of ordinary days. But he had rebuilt himself, brick by brick, investing in ventures few believed in until success was undeniable. The jet was not a trophy, it was a tool, a way to move swiftly between projects that created jobs for veterans like him, those whom the world too often discarded once the uniform came off. And now, standing here on the tarmac, he faced another battle. This one was smaller in scale, but heavier in irony. The same country for which he had risked everything was now represented, in this moment, by an officer who saw not his achievements, not his sacrifices, but only the color of his skin. The officer stepped closer, his boots scuffing against the concrete. The man's silence persisted. The crowd's discomfort grew, the unspoken question hanging in the air. How far would this go? From the corner of the tarmac, another figure approached, a pilot in full uniform, cap tucked neatly under his arm. His pace was brisk, his eyes locked on the confrontation ahead. There was a flicker of recognition when he saw the man by the jet, and his jaw set with purpose. Without slowing, he positioned himself between the officer and the silent man, his voice calm but carrying the weight of authority. He didn't raise his tone, didn't need to. The words he spoke were simple, factual, and undeniable. The jet, he explained, belonged not to some absent magnate or faceless corporation. It belonged to the man standing right there. The officer's expression shifted, confusion flickering into disbelief before hardening into something more brittle. The crowd heard the words, and the ripple of realization passed silently between them. The power dynamic that had been so rigid moments ago now hung fractured in the air. The man still hadn't spoken. He didn't need to. His silence was the loudest thing on the tarmac now, amplified by the pilot's affirmation. The officer's hand slipped away from his weapon. For a moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, the tension bled out of the space like air from a balloon. Some of the bystanders looked away, ashamed they had watched without intervening. Others studied the man more closely now, as if trying to reconcile the assumptions they had made with the truth they had just learned. In the quiet that followed, the man finally moved, not toward the officer, not toward the onlookers, but toward the steps of his jet. Each step was deliberate, a statement in itself. He didn't glance back, didn't offer a single word. The door closed behind him with a finality that left the officer staring at the ground. Those who witnessed it would carry the memory, some as a lesson, others as a warning. The pilot returned to his duties, but not before offering the faintest nod toward the cabin door, a gesture of respect for the man who had chosen silence over spectacle. Inside the jet, the man settled into his seat, his gaze turning to the horizon. The battles of his life had taught him that victory rarely came with fanfare. It came in moments like this, when dignity remained intact, when the truth revealed itself without the need for force. Somewhere deep inside, he knew this would not be the last time he faced such a confrontation. But he also knew that he carried within him something no one could take away. The unshakable certainty of who he was, and the quiet strength to endure until the world caught up. And for those who had watched from the sidelines, the image would linger, a man walking into his own jet, not because someone granted him permission, but because it was his from the start. The ownership was not just of the plane, but of his story, his resilience, and the space he refused to surrender.